The Hidden Power: How Deception Shapes Nations and Controls Minds. In a society that claims to be open and free, few things are more dangerous than secrets. We like to believe in transparency, accountability, and truth, but beneath the surface, systems operate in shadows. Behind the public speeches, the elections, the headlines, lies a different reality. One shaped by strategy, secrecy, and power. For centuries, humanity has grappled with invisible forces, covert organizations, silent pacts, private meetings behind locked doors. These aren't just features of fiction or conspiracy. They are the historical tools of influence and control. And no one understood this better than a man from Renaissance Florence, Niccolò Machiavelli. Machiavelli is often reduced to a single word: Machiavellian. It evokes images of ruthless ambition, manipulation, and cold strategy. But this is only half the truth. In his lesser-known work, Discourses on Livy, Machiavelli championed republican government and civic virtue. He praised liberty and warned against tyranny. But in his most infamous book, The Prince, he explored a far darker side of governance. This wasn't an instruction manual for the virtuous ruler. It was a brutally honest dissection of power. Written in the early 1500s, The Prince laid bare the mechanisms rulers used to rise, survive, and dominate. It was so provocative that the Catholic Church banned it for 2 centuries. Yet its impact was impossible to contain. From political advisors to corporate executives, revolutionaries to tyrants, Machiavelli's ideas seeped into every crevice of power across the globe. So how did one man's words echo across history, shaping kings and democrats alike? And what does his legacy reveal about the world we live in today? Born in 1469, Niccolò Machiavelli grew up in a Florence divided by political chaos and cultural brilliance. His father, though not wealthy, ensured he received a classical education rooted in grammar, rhetoric, poetry, and moral philosophy. It was believed that these studies would prepare one not only for scholarship, but for public life, a life Machiavelli would soon embrace. Florence was not a unified state. It was a republic caught between powerful factions, shifting alliances, and foreign invasions. The Medici family had long dominated the city through banking and patronage of the arts. But when France invaded in 1494, the Medicis were ousted, and a new republic was declared. In this new government, Machiavelli rose quickly. By the age of 29, he was appointed to high office and sent on diplomatic missions across Europe, to France, the Papal States, and the Holy Roman Empire. He observed powerful leaders up close. He studied how they negotiated, deceived, conquered, and ruled. But most importantly, he noticed a pattern. Power was rarely won through virtue. It was won through calculation. His observations would eventually coalesce into The Prince, a book that pulled back the curtain on power. He argued that rulers should not always aim to be good, but to appear good. That fear could be more effective than love. That deception was a tool, not a sin, in the pursuit of stability. To his critics, he was a cynic. To his admirers, a realist. But Machiavelli didn't invent corruption. He exposed it. He didn't promote tyranny. He warned that morality often had little to do with how nations were run. And in doing so, he gave future rulers a playbook. One of those rulers was Joseph Stalin. Few figures in history embodied Machiavelli's darker lessons like Stalin. Rising to power in the Soviet Union in the early 20th century, Stalin used terror, surveillance, and propaganda to cement his control. He purged his enemies, suppressed dissent, and rewrote history to place himself at the center of the Soviet myth. He understood something Machiavelli had once written: "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Stalin created a personality cult so powerful that people wept at his death, even those imprisoned in his labor camps. His face adorned billboards, textbooks, and children's classrooms. Loyalty was no longer a choice, it was survival. Stalin used propaganda not just to control behavior, but to shape reality, to make citizens believe they were living in a paradise, while millions suffered in silence. And he's not alone. Modern regimes, from North Korea to authoritarian states across the globe, continue to use the same tactics. Because, as Machiavelli warned, the appearance of virtue is more important than virtue itself. But what about today? Have we moved beyond such strategies in democratic societies? Not quite. Modern leaders don't need gulags or secret police to maintain power. They have something even more effective: media, television, algorithms, sound bites, and sponsored content. These are the tools of influence now. And while they may seem harmless, they are incredibly powerful. Political image is carefully curated. Speeches are rehearsed. Public outrage is manufactured. And policies that benefit the few are disguised as victories for the many. The 21st century ruler doesn't need to be a tyrant. They just need to look like a savior. And it works. Because people judge more by appearances than by experience. You see the smiling politician on stage, but not the lobbyist behind closed doors. You hear the promises, but not the caveats. Machiavelli predicted this long ago. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few truly know who you are." But even beyond politics, deception has found its way into the very foundation of our economies. Let's talk about money. You may have noticed that the cost of living keeps rising. A loaf of bread that once cost 50 cents now sells for $5. Rent, tuition, health care, everything is climbing. But why? One word: inflation. Inflation is not just a byproduct of economics. It's a hidden form of taxation, a way for governments to extract value from citizens without raising taxes. Here's how it works. When governments spend more than they earn, they borrow. But over time, debts accumulate. To pay those debts without facing backlash, they print more money. And as more money enters the system, the value of existing money drops. This erodes your purchasing power. You're not getting poorer because your paycheck shrank. You're getting poorer because your money buys less. And while the rich shield themselves by owning assets, stocks, real estate, gold, the average person suffers. Inflation, in Machiavellian terms, is the perfect tactic. It's invisible, hard to trace, and easy to justify. And most people never realize they've been robbed. In the past, governments couldn't print endlessly. Paper money was backed by gold. This was known as the gold standard. Under that system, every dollar represented a tangible quantity of gold held in reserve. You couldn't just create more money without acquiring more gold. But in 1971, the United States abandoned the gold standard. And since then, the floodgates have opened. National debt has soared. The dollar has lost over 90% of its value. And while the numbers in your bank account may rise, the actual value behind them continues to shrink. The result? An economy built on promises, not production. Machiavelli warned that generosity, when funded by unsustainable means, always ends in ruin. He wrote, "A prince who tries to be generous with everyone will eventually lose everything." And yet, today's politicians promise the world free services, subsidies, bailouts. They don't raise your taxes, they just borrow and print. But eventually, the cost comes due. And when it does, it's not the elite who suffer. It's the working class, the young, the retired, the poor. So, where does this leave us? It leaves us in a world where appearances matter more than actions, where power is maintained through illusion, where economic policies serve short-term gains and long-term collapse. Machiavelli's world was filled with swords, crowns, and intrigue. Ours is filled with suits, microphones, and banknotes. But the principles are the same. Those who understand how power works, how perception shapes reality, will always dominate those who do not. This is why it's crucial to read between the lines, to question what you're told, to understand the game being played, because in the end, power doesn't disappear. It evolves. The wise man acts while the fool reacts. That's not Machiavelli, it's an ancient Chinese proverb. But its truth is universal. If you want to protect yourself in the modern world, you must think critically, study history, understand the forces at play, and most importantly, recognize that power, whether wielded through force, wealth, or persuasion, always has a cost. Machiavelli didn't give us answers. He gave us a mirror. The question is, will we look into it or turn away?